The morning sun painted the mountain peaks golden as Master Liu packed his small bag. After 15 years of living alone in the remote mountains of China, he was finally coming down to the world below. His weathered hands folded his simple clothes carefully. Each movement was slow and thoughtful, just like everything else he did. Liu had been just 30 years old when he first climbed up these mountains. Back then, he was angry and lost. His family business had failed. His wife had left him. Everything he thought he knew about life had crumbled. A wise old monk had told him that sometimes you need to lose everything to find yourself. So Liu sold what little he had left and disappeared into the mountains. The first years were hard, really hard. He lived in a tiny wooden hut that barely kept out the rain. He grew his own vegetables and caught fish from the crystal-clear mountain stream. But most importantly, he learned Kung Fu from Master Wang, an elderly man who had been living on the mountain for over 40 years. Master Wang was different from any teacher Liu had ever met. He didn't just teach fighting moves, he taught patience. He taught respect. He taught how to control anger and fear. Every morning before sunrise, they would practice together in a small clearing surrounded by bamboo trees. Every evening, they would sit quietly and watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Fighting is not about hurting others, Master Wang would say in his gentle voice. True martial arts is about protecting life and finding peace within yourself. Liu learned this lesson the hard way. In his early days on the mountain, he was still full of rage about his failed life. He would punch trees until his knuckles bled. He would scream at the wind. But Master Wang never got angry with him. Instead, the old teacher would simply sit, nearby as calm as a still pond, waiting for Liu to tire himself out. Slowly, year by year, Liu changed. His angry heart became peaceful. His restless mind became focused. His weak body became strong. He learned to move like water, flowing around obstacles instead of crashing through them. He learned to breathe deeply, letting each breath wash away his worries. Most importantly, he learned that real strength comes from helping others, not hurting them. Master Wang passed away 3 years ago, leaving Liu alone on the mountain. But the old teacher's lessons lived on in every movement Liu made, every breath he took, every peaceful moment he enjoyed watching the clouds drift by. Now, at 45, Liu looked completely different from the broken man who had climbed up the mountain all those years ago. His hair was streaked with silver, but his eyes sparkled with inner peace. His body was lean and strong from years of training and simple mountain living. His hands, once soft from office work, were now calloused from chopping wood and tending his garden. The letter that changed everything had arrived just 1 week ago. A young messenger had climbed the steep mountain path, breathing heavily and looking amazed that anyone actually lived up there. The envelope bore the official seal of the royal palace. Liu's hands had trembled slightly as he read the invitation. The Royal Cultural Festival was looking for masters of traditional Chinese arts to demonstrate their skills. Someone had recommended Liu's name, though he couldn't imagine who. The letter explained that the festival celebrated the kingdom's rich cultural diversity, and they wanted to show people the beauty of ancient martial arts. For 6 days, Liu thought about the invitation. Part of him wanted to stay in his peaceful mountain home. Life was simple here, predictable, safe. He had his routine of morning practice, tending his small garden, reading ancient texts, and evening meditation. Why disturb this perfect balance? But another part of him remembered Master Wang's words. Knowledge that is not shared dies with the person who holds it. The old teacher had always said that Liu would know when it was time to come down from the mountain and share what he had learned. Maybe that time was now. On the 7th day, Liu made his decision. He would go to the royal palace, demonstrate the traditional kung fu that Master Wang had taught him, and then return to his mountain home. It would be a simple trip. What could possibly go wrong? As he walked down the mountain path for the first time in 15 years, Liu felt nervous. The modern world had changed so much. Even from his remote mountain home, he could sometimes see airplanes flying overhead and hear the distant sounds of construction in the valleys below. He wondered if people would even be interested in the old ways of martial arts. The bus ride to the capital city was overwhelming. Liu sat quietly by the window, watching the landscape change from wild mountains to organized farms to busy towns. People around him talked loudly into their phones, ate fast food from crinkly packages, and seemed always in a hurry. Everything moved so fast compared to the gentle rhythm of mountain life. When Liu finally saw the royal palace, his breath caught in his throat. It was even more magnificent than he had imagined. Golden spires reached toward the sky. Beautiful gardens stretched as far as he could see. Guards in crisp uniforms stood at attention by massive gates decorated with intricate carvings. But as Liu approached the palace gates, carrying his simple canvas bag and wearing his plain gray training clothes, he began to feel out of place. Everyone else seemed to belong here. They wore fancy clothes and spoke confidently to the guards. They had official-looking papers and knew exactly where to go. Liu showed his invitation letter to the guard at the main gate. The young man looked at the mountain master with barely hidden suspicion. Liu's clothes were clean but simple. His shoes were old but well-maintained. He didn't look like the kind of person who usually received royal invitations. "You're here for the cultural festival?" the guard asked, looking Liu up and down. "Yes, sir," Liu replied quietly. "I am here to demonstrate traditional kung fu." The guard checked his list several times before finally nodding and pointing toward a side entrance. "Go through that gate and follow the signs to the east courtyard. Check in with the festival coordinator when you get there." As Liu walked through the palace grounds, he marveled at everything around him. Ancient trees provided shade for perfectly manicured lawns. Fountains created soothing sounds of flowing water. Peacocks strutted across the pathways, their colorful feathers catching the sunlight. It was beautiful, but also intimidating. The east courtyard was buzzing with activity. Performers from all over the kingdom were setting up displays and practicing their arts. Liu saw traditional dancers stretching in colorful costumes, musicians tuning ancient instruments, and craftspeople arranging displays of their work. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Liu found the check-in table and introduced himself to the festival coordinator, a busy woman with kind eyes who was juggling multiple conversations at once. "Oh yes, Master Liu," she said, checking his name off her list. "We're so excited to have you here. Traditional martial arts demonstrations are always crowd favorites. Your performance area is marked over there by the fountain. You'll have 30 minutes to show people the beauty of Kung Fu. The royal family will be watching from the covered pavilion, so make it special." Liu bowed politely and walked to his assigned area. It was a circular space about 20 feet across, with a smooth stone surface perfect for martial arts demonstrations. A small rope barrier separated it from the walkway where visitors would gather to watch. As he set down his bag and began to stretch, Liu felt the familiar calm that always came before practice. This was what he knew. This was what he had trained for all these years. He might be far from his mountain home, but the ancient movements of Kung Fu would be the same whether he was practicing alone in his bamboo grove or here in front of hundreds of strangers. But as Liu prepared for what he thought would be a simple demonstration, he had no idea that in just a few hours, his life would change forever. A simple misunderstanding was about to turn his peaceful world upside down and lead Di to the most unexpected adventure of his entire life. The afternoon sun was perfect as crowds began gathering around Master Liu's demonstration area. Families with children pointed excitedly at the different performance spaces. Elderly couples walked slowly, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of the cultural festival. Young people took photos of everything, their phones clicking constantly. Liu had changed into his traditional white Kung Fu uniform. The fabric was simple cotton, but it had been hand-sewn by Master Wang years ago, and Liu treated it with great respect. He had tied his long hair back with a simple black cord and removed his shoes, preferring to feel the cool stone beneath his bare feet. As people gathered around the rope barrier, Liu began with basic warm-up exercises. He moved slowly and gracefully, each gesture flowing into the next like water. Children pressed against the rope, their eyes wide with wonder. Adults whispered among themselves, impressed by the master's fluid movements. "Ladies and gentlemen," Liu said in his quiet but clear voice, "Kung Fu is not about violence or showing off. It is about finding harmony between mind, body, and spirit. What you will see today are movements that have been passed down for hundreds of years from teacher to student, keeping alive the wisdom of our ancestors. The crowd grew larger as Liu began demonstrating basic forms. He moved through the ancient patterns with perfect precision, his body telling stories of dragons soaring through clouds and tigers prowling through forests. Even though he was speaking softly, somehow everyone could hear him clearly. There was something peaceful about his presence that made people want to listen. Liu was just beginning to demonstrate defensive techniques when he noticed a commotion near the royal pavilion. Several people were talking quickly and pointing in different directions. A woman in an official-looking uniform was checking a tablet and shaking her head with concern. What Liu didn't know was that there had been a translation error in the festival program. The original instructions, written in Chinese, had been translated into the local language by someone who didn't fully understand martial arts terminology. Where the program should have said, peaceful demonstration of traditional forms, it instead said interactive combat demonstration with volunteer participation. Captain Rodriguez, the head of the Royal Guard, had been specifically assigned to monitor all demonstrations for security purposes. He was a decorated soldier in his early 40s, known throughout the palace for his dedication and attention to detail. When he read the mistranslated program, he understood it to mean that Master Liu's demonstration would include actual sparring with volunteers from the audience. Rodriguez was not a man who took security lightly. In his 15 years protecting the royal family, he had never allowed any potentially dangerous activity to occur without proper supervision. The thought of an unknown martial artist engaging in combat with untrained civilians, especially with the royal family watching, made him very nervous. As Liu continued his graceful demonstration, Rodriguez approached the performance area. He had intended to quietly discuss the situation with the martial artist and suggest modifications to ensure everyone's safety. But as he walked closer, another misunderstanding was brewing. The festival coordinator, realizing the translation error, had rushed over to explain the situation to Liu. However, in her haste to prevent any problems, she spoke quickly in the local dialect, mixing in some English words that Liu barely understood. What Liu heard was something about interaction and demonstration and official request. Liu, wanting to be respectful and accommodating to his hosts, nodded politely and assumed that the palace officials wanted him to show more dynamic techniques. In traditional martial arts demonstrations, it was common to have a partner help show defensive applications. Master Wang had often used Liu as a partner in this way when demonstrating techniques to visitors on the mountain. So when Captain Rodriguez stepped into the demonstration area, Liu naturally assumed this was the official interaction the coordinator had mentioned. Rodriguez, for his part, thought he was stepping in to end what he believed was about to become an unsafe combat demonstration. The crowd, sensing something interesting was about to happen, pressed closer to the rope barriers. The murmur of conversation grew louder as people noticed the head of the royal guard entering the performance space. Even the royal family members, who had been politely watching from their comfortable seats in the pavilion, leaned forward with increased interest. "Excuse me," Rodriguez said formally, his hand resting on his ceremonial sword. "I need to speak with you about your demonstration." Liu, thinking this was the beginning of the requested partner demonstration, bowed respectfully and said, "Of course, sir. Thank you for volunteering to help show the traditional techniques." Rodriguez, confused by Liu's response but committed to handling the situation, stepped closer. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm here about the safety protocols." But Liu, whose English was limited and who was interpreting everything through the lens of martial arts etiquette, thought Rodriguez was asking about the safety aspects of the techniques he was about to demonstrate. This was actually a common concern when showing martial arts to new audiences. "Yes, sir," Liu said with a gentle smile. "These techniques are very safe when performed correctly. Please stand here, and I will show everyone how the defensive movements work." Before Rodriguez could explain that this wasn't what he meant, Liu had moved into position. The captain, now thoroughly confused but not wanting to cause a scene in front of hundreds of spectators and the royal family, decided to play along briefly while trying to figure out what was happening. Liu began demonstrating, a traditional defensive sequence moving slowly and explaining each step to the audience. This technique is called flowing water defense, he said calmly. When someone approaches with aggressive intention, we do not meet force with force. Instead, we redirect their energy and create distance safely. Rodriguez, still not understanding that he was supposed to play the role of an attacker in the demonstration, stood stiffly in place. Liu, sensing his partner's confusion, gently guided the captain's arm into the proper position for the demonstration. "Please, sir," Liu said quietly. "Just move forward naturally and I will show everyone how to safely defend." Rodriguez, thinking this was some kind of security test or cultural protocol he wasn't familiar with, decided to follow instructions. He began to move forward, but his military training made his movements sharp and aggressive rather than the controlled motions Liu was expecting. The moment Rodriguez lunged forward with sudden military precision, everything changed. Liu's 15 years of mountain training took over instantly. His body moved without conscious thought, responding to what it perceived as a genuine attack. His right hand came up in a perfect defensive motion, his palm connecting with Rodriguez's face in a technique designed to stop an attacker without causing permanent harm. The sound of the contact echoed across the suddenly silent courtyard. Rodriguez, caught completely off guard, stumbled backward and fell to one knee. A gasp went up from the crowd as hundreds of people witnessed the moment when a simple martial arts demonstration became something much more serious. Liu immediately realized what had happened. His face went pale as he saw Rodriguez on the ground, one hand pressed to his cheek where Liu's palm had struck. The crowd was dead silent, everyone staring in shock. In the royal pavilion, security guards were already moving, their hands reaching for their weapons. "I am so sorry," Liu whispered, reaching out to help Rodriguez to his feet. I believed you were part of the demonstration." But Rodriguez, his pride wounded more than his face, was already standing up. His cheek was red, and his eyes were blazing with anger and embarrassment. In 15 years of military service, he had never been struck by a civilian, especially not in front of the people he was sworn to protect. "Arrest this man," Rodriguez shouted, his voice carrying across the entire courtyard. "He has assaulted an officer of the Royal Guard." Within seconds, the peaceful cultural festival had become a scene of chaos. Royal Guards appeared from everywhere, surrounding Liu with their weapons drawn. The crowd began pushing and shoving to get a better view or to move away from potential danger. Children started crying. Parents grabbed their families and headed for the exits. Liu stood perfectly still in the center of the circle of guards, his hands at his sides, his head bowed in shame and confusion. Everything had happened so fast. One moment, he had been peacefully demonstrating the ancient art that Master Wang had taught him. The next moment, he was surrounded by armed guards and facing arrest for attacking a royal official. As the guards moved closer, Liu closed his eyes and thought of his peaceful mountain home. He thought of Master Wang's gentle teachings about using martial arts only to protect, never to harm. He had spent 15 years learning to control his reactions, to find peace in every situation. But in one split second, all of that training had led to this disaster. The crowd continued to grow as news of the incident spread throughout the festival. People were taking videos with their phones, capturing every moment of Liu's humiliation. Within minutes, those videos would be shared across social media platforms, spreading the story far beyond the palace walls. But as the guards prepared to arrest Master Liu, none of them noticed that someone very important. The palace courtyard had transformed from a peaceful cultural celebration into a scene of complete pandemonium. Royal guards formed a tight circle around Master Liu, their ceremonial swords gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. The martial artist stood motionless at the center, his white uniform stark against the dark uniform surrounding him. His eyes closed in meditation despite the chaos erupting around him. Captain Rodriguez pressed a cloth to his reddened cheek, his face burning with embarrassment more than pain. In all his years of military service, he had faced enemy soldiers, protected the royal family from genuine threats, and maintained order during countless public events. But never had he been struck down in front of hundreds of witnesses, especially not by someone he had been trying to help. "Get everyone back." Rodriguez barked to his men, "Clear the area immediately." But the crowd had other ideas. Instead of moving away, more people pressed forward, trying to get a better view of the unprecedented drama unfolding. Cell phones appeared everywhere, their cameras capturing every angle of the incident. The clicking of photos and the buzz of excited conversations created a wall of sound that echoed off the palace walls. Near the check-in table, the festival coordinator was frantically making phone calls, her voice high with panic. "Yes, sir, there's been an incident. No, nobody was seriously hurt, but yes, the royal family was watching. I don't know how this happened. The program said it was just a peaceful demonstration." The other festival performers had stopped their own activities and were gathering around the edges of the courtyard, whispering among themselves. The traditional dancers still wore their colorful costumes, but their festive appearance seemed out of place now. The musicians had set down their instruments, and even the craftspeople had abandoned their displays to see what was happening. Children in the crowd were asking their parents questions that were difficult to answer. Why are the guards arresting the Kung Fu man? Did he do something bad? Is he going to jail? Parents tried to shield their young ones from the scene while satisfying their own curiosity about what would happen next. Liu opened his eyes and looked around at the faces staring at him. Some showed fear, some showed excitement, some showed confusion. But in all of them, he saw the same thing. They were looking at him as if he were dangerous, as if he were some kind of criminal. The peaceful martial artist who had spent 15 years learning to harm no living thing was now seen as a threat. "Sir," one of the younger guards said to Liu, his voice shaking slightly with nervousness, "you need to put your hands behind your back." Liu complied immediately, offering no resistance as the cold metal handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The weight of them felt strange and heavy, so different from the lightness he had cultivated through years of mountain training. As the metal touched his skin, he thought about how Master Wong would have handled this situation. The old teacher had always said that sometimes life tests us in ways we never expect, and our response to these tests reveals who we really are. From the Royal Pavilion, Palace Security Chief Commander Thompson was speaking urgently into his radio. "I need a full security sweep of the entire festival area. Lock down all entrances until we know what we're dealing with. And get me a complete background check on this martial artist immediately." But the most difficult part of the situation was dealing with the media attention that was exploding in real time. Palace Communications Director Ms. Patricia Wong was watching in horror as videos of the incident began appearing on social media platforms. The hashtags Palace Fight and the Kung Fu V's guards were already trending, and news outlets were picking up the story. "This is a disaster," she muttered to her assistant. "How do we explain this to the press? A civilian assaulted the head of the Royal Guard during a children's cultural festival. The headlines are going to be terrible." Meanwhile, Captain Rodriguez was trying to make sense of what had actually happened. As his initial anger cooled, he began to replay the sequence of events in his mind. The martial artist had seemed genuinely confused, not aggressive. His movements had been defensive, not attacking. And the look of horror on Liu's face after the strike suggested that it hadn't been intentional. But Rodriguez's military pride made it difficult to admit that the incident might have been a misunderstanding. He had been made to look foolish in front of his own men, in front of the royal family he was sworn to protect, and in front of hundreds of civilians. His reputation and authority were on the line. "Sir," one of his sergeants approached quietly, "what should we do with the prisoner?" Rodriguez looked at Liu, who was standing peacefully despite the handcuffs, his face showing nothing but calm acceptance of whatever fate awaited him. There was something about the man's demeanor that didn't fit with Rodriguez's image of a dangerous criminal. "Take him to the holding cell in the security building," Rodriguez said finally. "We'll sort this out properly once everyone calms down." As the guards began to escort Liu away, the crowd pressed forward again. Some people were shouting questions. What did he do? Is the captain okay? Will he be charged with a crime? Others were recording everything, knowing that this unexpected drama would be shared thousands of times before the sun set. Liu walked between the guards with his head held high, not in arrogance, but in acceptance. He had learned from Master Wong that dignity comes from within, not from circumstances. Even as a prisoner, even as someone who had accidentally brought shame to himself and confusion to others, he could maintain his inner peace. The walk to the security building felt like miles, though it was only a few hundred yards. Every step took Liu further from the cultural festival that was supposed to be a simple demonstration of his art. Every step took him deeper into a situation he didn't understand and couldn't control. Behind them, the festival was effectively over. The other performers were packing up their displays, uncertain whether they should continue or call it a day. Families were leaving, many of them disappointed that their pleasant afternoon had been ruined by violence. The festival coordinator was dealing with complaints, refund requests, and a growing media circus. In the security building, Liu was processed like any other detainee. His few possessions were taken and catalogued. His simple canvas bag, containing a change of clothes, a small wooden flute Master Wong had carved, and an ancient book of philosophy. The guards were surprised by how little he carried, and how peacefully he accepted each step of the booking process. The holding cell was small and plain, with concrete walls, a narrow bench, and a single window that looked out toward the mountains. Liu sat on the bench and gazed toward those distant peaks, thinking about his simple hut and his peaceful daily routine. Just this morning, he had been excited about sharing Master Wong's teachings with new people. Now he was locked in a cage, facing charges he didn't understand. Outside the security building, the media was beginning to arrive. News vans with satellite dishes pulled up to the palace gates. Reporters were interviewing anyone who had witnessed the incident, trying to piece together what had happened. The story was already spreading beyond the local area, with national news networks picking up the unusual tale of a martial artist who had struck a royal guard. Captain Rodriguez sat in his office, an ice pack pressed to his cheek, reviewing security footage of the incident. Watching it again, he could see more clearly what had actually happened. The martial artist's reaction had been defensive, not aggressive. His strike had been controlled, designed to stop rather than to seriously harm, and his immediate concern afterward suggested genuine remorse, not satisfaction at having hurt someone. Rodriguez was beginning to suspect that the whole thing had been a terrible misunderstanding, but admitting that now would be complicated. The incident had been witnessed by hundreds of people and captured on dozens of cameras. The palace's reputation was at stake, and his own credibility as head of security was on the line. As evening approached, the festival grounds were mostly empty except for cleanup crews and security personnel. The cultural celebration that was meant to showcase the beauty of traditional arts had been overshadowed by confusion and conflict. The vendors packed up their booths, the performers loaded their equipment, and the families went home with stories of unexpected drama instead of peaceful cultural education. But in the royal pavilion, someone had been watching the entire sequence of events with very different eyes. Someone who understood martial arts, who recognized the difference between attack and defense, who could see past the surface chaos to the deeper truth of what had really happened. King Ferdinand III had been studying martial arts and Eastern philosophy for over 20 years. He had trained with masters from various traditions, seeking to understand not just the physical techniques but the mental discipline and spiritual insights that true martial arts could provide. What he had witnessed that afternoon was not an attack by a dangerous criminal, but a moment of perfect defensive technique, executed by someone with extraordinary training and remarkable restraint. As his security team prepared to brief him on the incident and recommend charges against the martial artist, the king was preparing to do something that would surprise everyone. The evening sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as King Ferdinand III walked alone toward the security building. His personal guards followed at a respectful distance, accustomed to their monarch's habit of taking solitary walks when he needed to think deeply about important decisions. The king was not what most people expected from a royal leader. At 52 years old, he was tall and lean, with graying hair that he kept simply styled and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see everything. Unlike many monarchs who relied heavily on advisors and protocol, Ferdinand had always preferred to make his own judgments about people and situations. His interest in martial arts had begun 23 years ago when he was still a prince. During a diplomatic visit to Japan, he had witnessed a demonstration of Aikido that had completely changed his understanding of strength and power. The master had been a small, elderly man who had effortlessly defeated multiple younger, stronger opponents without causing them any real harm. When Ferdinand asked how this was possible, the master had smiled and said, "True strength comes from understanding, not from force." That conversation had led Ferdinand down a path of study that few people knew about. He had trained privately with masters from China, Japan, Korea, and Thailand. He had studied the philosophical foundations of martial arts, learning about concepts like Wu Wei, the art of acting without forcing, and the importance of maintaining inner peace even in conflict situations. So when Ferdinand had watched the incident in the courtyard that afternoon, he had seen something completely different from what everyone else saw. While the crowd saw violence and the guards saw an attack on their captain, the king had witnessed a perfect example of restraint and defensive technique. Master Liu's response to Captain Rodriguez's forward movement had been textbook martial arts defense. His palm strike had been precisely controlled, designed to stop the captain without causing serious injury. Most importantly, Ferdinand had seen the immediate look of horror and concern on Liu's face after the contact, showing that it had been an instinctive reaction, not a planned attack. Now, as Ferdinand approached the security building, his mind was already made up about what needed to happen next. But he knew his decision would surprise everyone involved, especially Captain Rodriguez, who was expecting the king to support harsh punishment for the martial artist. Inside the building, Rodriguez was preparing his final report on the incident. He had reviewed all the security footage, interviewed witnesses, and consulted with the palace legal team about appropriate charges. Despite his growing suspicions that the whole thing had been a misunderstanding, he felt obligated to recommend serious consequences. His reputation and the security of the royal family seemed to depend on taking a strong stance. In the holding cell, Master Liu had spent the past 4 hours in quiet meditation. The concrete walls and iron bars couldn't imprison his mind, which had found its way back to the peaceful mountain clearing where he had learned these lessons years ago. He could almost hear Master Wang's gentle voice explaining that every experience, even difficult ones, could teach us something important if we remained open to learning. Liu had accepted that his life was about to change dramatically. He would probably face criminal charges, spend time in prison, and return to his mountain home as a disgraced man who had brought shame to the martial arts he loved. But even this knowledge couldn't disturb his inner calm. Master Wang had taught him that external circumstances could not touch the peace that lived within his heart. The sound of footsteps in the corridor interrupted his meditation. Liu expected to see guards coming to move him to a different facility, or officials arriving to formal charges. Instead, he heard a single set of footsteps moving slowly and deliberately down the hall. When King Ferdinand III appeared at the door of his cell, Liu's eyes widened in shock. He had seen pictures of the monarch in newspapers and on television, but seeing him in person was completely different. The king radiated a quiet authority that reminded Liu of Master Wang's presence, a sense of deep wisdom and inner strength. Ferdinand looked at Liu for a long moment, taking in the martial artist's calm demeanor and respectful posture. Even in this humiliating situation, Liu maintained his dignity without arrogance, showing the kind of character that true martial arts training was supposed to develop. "Master Liu," the king said quietly, "I believe we need to talk." Liu immediately moved to bow despite the awkwardness of the handcuffs. "Your Majesty, I am deeply sorry for the trouble I have caused. I never intended to." Ferdinand raised his hand gently, stopping the apology. "I know you didn't intend to hurt anyone. I watched the entire incident very carefully. What I saw was not an attack, but a defensive response from someone with extraordinary training and remarkable control." Liu looked up in amazement. In all his hours of replaying the incident in his mind, he had never imagined that anyone, especially not the king himself, might understand what had really happened. "Your Majesty sees clearly," Liu said with genuine respect. "But I understand that my actions have caused problems for the palace and Captain Rodriguez. I am prepared to accept whatever punishment is appropriate." Ferdinand smiled, recognizing the humility and acceptance of responsibility that marked true wisdom. Tell me about your training, Master Lu. Who taught you to move with such precision and restraint? For the next 30 minutes, Liu shared the story of his time on the mountain with Master Wang. He spoke about learning to find peace through martial arts, about understanding that true strength comes from protecting rather than harming, and about the years of patient practice required to develop both physical skill and mental discipline. Ferdinand listened with the attention of someone who understood exactly what Liu was describing. As the martial artist spoke about his master's teachings, the king found himself thinking about his own journey of learning, his own struggles to balance power with wisdom, strength with compassion. Master Wang sounds like a remarkable teacher, Ferdinand said when Liu finished his story. His lessons about finding peace within conflict are exactly what our world needs more of. He was the wisest man I have ever known, Liu replied. Everything I understand about life I learned from watching him and practicing with him. I only wish I had not dishonored his teachings today. Ferdinand shook his head firmly. You did not dishonor anything, Master Liu. You responded to what you perceived as a threat with exactly the right amount of force to neutralize it without causing serious harm. That shows perfect control and deep understanding of martial arts. Principles. Liu stared at the king in amazement. After hours of feeling like a criminal who had brought shame to himself and his art, here was someone who not only understood what had really happened but appreciated the skill and restraint it had required. However, Ferdinand continued, I recognize that the situation is complicated. Captain Rodriguez is a good man who is doing his job, trying to ensure everyone's safety. The incident was witnessed by hundreds of people and recorded on many cameras. We need to address this in a way that respects everyone involved and serves the greater good. The king paused, his expression becoming more serious. Master Liu, I have a proposition for you, but before I make it, I need to know. Are you willing to trust me and accept guidance from someone you barely know? Liu didn't hesitate. Your Majesty has shown more understanding and wisdom in these few minutes than I have encountered in years. If you believe there is a way forward that serves justice and honor, I will follow your guidance. Ferdinand nodded, pleased by Liu's response but not surprised. True martial artists were trained to recognize authentic leadership and respond to it appropriately. Then here is what I propose, the king said, his voice taking on the formal tone of a royal decree. Tomorrow morning, instead of facing criminal charges, you will receive an official invitation to remain at the palace as my personal advisor on cultural preservation and traditional martial arts instruction. Liu's mouth fell open in shock. He had been prepared for prison, disgrace, and exile. Instead, the king was offering him a position of honor and responsibility. But Your Majesty, Liu stammered, what about Captain Rodriguez? What about the people who witnessed the incident? What about the damage to the palace's reputation? Ferdinand smiled, and Liu could see the wisdom and strategic thinking that had made this man an effective leader for over 2 decades. Captain Rodriguez will be the first person you work with in your new position. He will also be your first student in learning the deeper principles of martial arts. As for the witnesses and the media attention, we will use this incident as an opportunity to educate people about the real nature of traditional martial arts and the importance of preserving ancient wisdom in our modern world. The king's eyes sparkled with anticipation as he continued. Sometimes, Master Liu, what appears to be a disaster is actually the beginning of something wonderful. Your teacher, Master Wang, prepared you for this moment, even though neither of you knew it at the time. Liu felt tears gathering in his eyes as he realized that his greatest failure was about to become an opportunity beyond his wildest dreams. The mountain master who had expected to spend his remaining years in quiet solitude was being offered a chance to share Master Wang's teachings with the world in ways he had never imagined possible. Outside 6 months later, Master Liu stood in the same palace courtyard where his life had changed forever. But this time, instead of being surrounded by guards with weapons drawn, he was surrounded by students eager to learn. The morning sun painted everything in golden light as he prepared to begin another day of teaching in his new role as Royal Cultural Advisor. The transformation had not been easy or immediate. When King Ferdinand had first announced Liu's appointment, there had been shock, confusion, and quite a bit of resistance from various quarters. The media had initially been skeptical, with headlines like "From Criminal to Counselor" and "Palace Defends Hiring Martial Artist Who Struck Guard." Palace staff had whispered among themselves, wondering if their king had made a terrible mistake. But Ferdinand had been patient and strategic in how he handled the situation. Rather than simply announcing Liu's appointment and hoping for the best, he had orchestrated a careful campaign to help people understand what had really happened during that chaotic afternoon. The first step had been a private meeting between Liu and Captain Rodriguez. The king had brought them together in his personal study, a comfortable room lined with books on philosophy, history, and martial arts. Both men had been nervous, but Ferdinand's presence and gentle guidance had helped them move past their initial awkwardness. "Captain Rodriguez," the king had said, "I would like you to hear Master Liu's full story, and I would like Master Liu to understand your perspective on what happened during the festival." What followed was one of the most honest conversations either man had ever had. Rodriguez explained his confusion about the translated program, his concern for public safety, and his embarrassment at being caught off guard. Liu shared his own confusion about the situation, his horror at accidentally striking someone, and his deep respect for Rodriguez's dedication to protecting others. As they talked, both men began to see each other as human beings rather than as adversaries. Rodriguez realized that Liu was not a dangerous criminal but a dedicated teacher who had spent years learning to use his skills responsibly. Liu understood that Rodriguez was not an enemy, but a protector who had been trying to do his job in a confusing situation. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez asked Liu to explain exactly what had happened during those crucial seconds when everything went wrong. As Liu demonstrated the defensive technique he had used, Rodriguez began to appreciate the skill and restraint involved. "You could have seriously hurt me," Rodriguez realized, watching Liu's precise movements. "But you controlled the technique to do just enough to stop what you thought was an attack." "Yes," Liu replied quietly. "Master Wang taught me that the goal is always to end conflict, never to cause unnecessary harm. Your training taught you to protect others. We have different methods but the same purpose." From that conversation, an unexpected friendship began to grow. Rodriguez became Liu's first student at the palace, eager to learn the mental discipline and philosophical insights that traditional martial arts could provide. Liu, in turn, learned from Rodriguez about the challenges of protecting others in the modern world and the importance of clear communication in preventing misunderstandings. Their partnership became the foundation for everything that followed. When the media saw the head of the royal guard publicly studying with the man he had initially wanted arrested, public opinion began to shift. When Rodriguez spoke at press conferences about the value of Liu's teachings and the importance of preserving traditional knowledge, people started to listen. The king had also been brilliant in how he presented Liu's story to the public. Rather than focusing on the incident itself, Ferdinand emphasized Master Liu's journey from a broken businessman to a dedicated student of ancient wisdom. He spoke about the value of having advisors who understood both traditional culture and personal transformation. "In our rapidly changing world," the king had said in a televised address, "we need people who can bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern challenges. Master Liu represents the best of both worlds, deep knowledge of traditional arts, and hard-won understanding of how to find peace in difficult circumstances." The palace had also organized a series of public demonstrations where Liu could show the true nature of traditional martial arts. Unlike the chaotic scene at the cultural festival, these events were carefully planned and clearly explained. Liu would demonstrate the flowing forms, the philosophical principles, and the defensive applications, while providing context about the history and purpose of each technique. These demonstrations were revelations for most people. Instead of the violent, aggressive martial arts they had seen in movies and television, Liu showed them something completely different, an art form based on harmony, balance, and the intelligent use of minimal force to achieve maximum effect. Children were especially drawn to Liu's teachings. He had a gift for explaining complex philosophical concepts in simple terms that young minds could grasp. "Martial arts is like learning to be water," he would tell them. Water is soft, but it can overcome the hardest rock by being patient and finding the right path. Parents began bringing their children to Liu's classes, not just to learn self-defense, but to develop character, discipline, and inner peace. The palace's youth martial arts program became so popular that they had to expand it to multiple locations throughout the kingdom. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation was in Liu himself. After 15 years of solitary practice on the mountain, he had rediscovered the joy of sharing knowledge with others. Every day brought new students, new challenges, and new opportunities to honor Master Wang's memory by passing on his teachings. Liu's living quarters in the palace were simple but comfortable, a reminder that material luxury was less important than inner contentment. His rooms overlooked a peaceful garden where he could practice his morning forms in privacy. But his favorite time was the evening, when he would sit with Ferdinand and discuss the philosophical aspects of leadership and wisdom. These conversations had become precious to both men. Ferdinand had finally found someone who could understand his struggles to balance power with compassion, authority with humility. Liu had discovered that even kings faced the same fundamental challenges as mountain hermits: how to find peace within themselves and how to use their abilities to help others. Master Wang would be amazed to see where his teachings have led, Ferdinand said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors. He always said that when student is ready, the teacher appears, Liu replied with a gentle smile. But he never mentioned that sometimes the student appears when the teacher is ready too. The impact of Liu's work extended far beyond the palace walls. His approach to conflict resolution, based on understanding rather than force, had been adopted by police departments and schools throughout the kingdom. His teachings about finding inner peace had helped countless people deal with stress, anxiety, and anger. The viral videos of the original incident had been replaced by new viral content, videos of Liu's demonstrations, interviews about his philosophy, and testimonials from people whose lives had been changed by his teachings. The hashtags Darandra Palace Fight and Kung Fu V's Guards had been replaced by Ancient Wisdom and Non-Martial Arts Peace. Captain Rodriguez had also undergone his own transformation. His initial embarrassment about being struck by Liu had evolved into pride at being associated with the master's work. He had become an advocate for incorporating mindfulness and conflict de-escalation techniques into security training. Master Liu taught me that true strength comes from understanding yourself and others, Rodriguez would tell his fellow guards. When you know who you are and why you're here, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to do your job with wisdom and compassion. The friendship between Liu and Rodriguez had become legendary within the palace. They could often be seen practicing together in the early morning hours, the martial artist helping the soldier develop inner calm, while the soldier helped the teacher understand the practical challenges of protecting others in the modern world. Right? This particular morning, as Liu prepared to begin another day of classes, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. A simple misunderstanding had led to public humiliation, arrest, and the threat of criminal charges. But it had also led to opportunities he could never have imagined, friendships he treasured, and the chance to honor Master Wang's memory in ways that would have made the old teacher proud. As his students gathered in the courtyard, palace, staff, visiting diplomats, local children, and people from all walks of life who had come to learn about finding peace through ancient wisdom, Liu felt a deep sense of gratitude for the mysterious ways that life unfolds. "Good morning, everyone," he said to the assembled group. "Today we will practice finding stillness in the midst of movement, and movement in the midst of stillness. But first, let me tell you about my teacher, Master Wang, and the lessons he shared about turning obstacles into opportunities." As Liu began his lesson, King Ferdinand watched from his study window, smiling at the sight of so many people gathered to learn about wisdom, peace, and the incredible power